Embattled Old Mutual CEO Peter Moyo has been denied access to his office for a third time. Moyo reported for work this morning but was not allowed into the Old Mutual premises. Last week, he scored another victory in court against the insurance giant. SABC News reporter Nozintombi Miya spoke to Moyo and his legal representative Eric Mabuza a short while ago.
We're standing here at the foyer of the Old Mutual building headquarters in Sandton, and this is where we see for the third time the current CEO, Mr. Peter Moyo, being refused entry into his office for the third time. It certainly is a frustrating time for him and a frustrating process, and we speak to him a little bit more to get reaction from this. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Moyo. This morning has been an absolutely frustrating morning for you. Just take us through what happened.
Well, not entirely frustrating, because we expected this kind of behavior. We came here, we have a court order, and all we're saying is the company must comply with the court order. I've in the past said Old Mutual is a company which must comply with laws of our country, laws of every jurisdiction where Old Mutual operates, and they must respect court judgments.
And when you came in and you went up the escalators, who was there to greet you and tell you that you had no access?
Well, the head of security said to us he had actually been told not to, and they spoke, I think, to the head of human capital, who then apparently said they're going to get the lawyers to come through. Am I right, Eric? Yeah.
Yes, and you're here with your lawyer, Mr. Eric Mabuza, and we're going to speak to him shortly. But this must be a very frustrating time for you.
It is. It is frustrating, but when you're dealing with people whose modus operandi you understand, you can almost always predict what they're going to do. So it actually becomes less frustrating because you know what kind of people you're dealing with.
Yes, and let's bring in your legal representative. Mr. Eric Mabuza, thank you so much for joining me. What are the legal steps going forward?
Well, thank you for coming to cover this important story. We are very patient. You know, the arm of the law is very long. We're here to come and give Old Mutual an opportunity to mitigate or purge the previous acts of contempt. Now, what they have done to disallow Mr. Moyo from taking over his position will further serve as aggravation of the previous contempt. So, in other words, it's going to make the contempt worse. We now expected each and every board member to take a decision to decide for themselves whether they associate themselves with these further acts of contempt. Because as you know, in the next 9 days, they're expected to give an explanation why they sent the letter of the 21st of August. As you know, that in 30 days, we'll be back in court to argue the issue of contempt.
All right. Mr. Mabuza, this really does seem to be a flagrant disregard of the legal process and also a form of victimization against your client, Mr. Moyo.
Completely. I've never seen anything like this where a big company like Old Mutual simply says to a court they're not going to comply with a court order. I've never seen this in my whole experience as a lawyer. But as I say, we are very patient. We will bring this further evidence to the attention of the judge. As you know, one of the directors has previously resigned because presumably she could not associate herself further with what has been happening. And we welcome that move. It was a good move, and we've subsequently withdrawn proceedings against her. So now we're going against the other board members who still associate themselves with this conduct. I mean, the way Old Mutual has behaved is completely unacceptable. We are even thinking of bringing the sheriff to come with the sheriff next time we come here to let the sheriff implement the court order, to let them deal with the sheriff, because this is just unacceptable.
Absolutely unacceptable that you would have to actually bring in the sheriff to enact a legal judgment that entitles your client to go into work and access his offices.
That's what we have to consider to do, because we have no other alternative. We can't barge in here and do anything that is not allowed by law. As you know, the sheriff is the only body that is allowed to execute court orders, so we have no option but to consider bringing the sheriff to come and implement the court order.
Mr. Moyo, your final thoughts. Do you feel that you're being victimized by the board, the CEO, and the structures of the board?
We've actually been clear in our court papers what we think this is all about.
Which is?
Well, we actually did say that one, they did not respect the contract, they did not respect the laws of this country. The board allowed the views of one person to dominate everything, and I mean we've actually been quite clear about it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Peter Moyo and his legal representative, Mr. Eric Mabuza. Mr. Peter Moyo is the CEO of Old Mutual, in spite of there being an interim CEO here at Old Mutual, and he was due to report for work this morning here at the headquarters at Old Mutual, and he was turned away by the head of security and human capital here at Old Mutual.